Hey y'all, I'm Chris Wyden. Welcome to Misinformation. Okie doke, let's start with the simp shit. Am I using that right?
What are you trying to say?
Where does your drinking water come from? And more importantly, why doesn't it make you sick?
Misinformation.
If you live in a place, which you have to, then your water probably comes from one of three sources. Little old lakes, wriggly rivers, and groundwater. If you live in a place in the United States, then your water will flow from intake points to treatment plants. Next, the water ends up in a giant storage tank, and then whenever you flush a toilet or turn on a faucet, it flows from those tanks into your home.
Have you seen my dad?
And that's nice and all, but it is the least important aspect of how we get our drinking water. I know the plumbing thing is important because without it we wouldn't have the magical reality of water flowing directly into our kitchens. But what I think is more important is making sure that our elixir of life doesn't kill us. Because let's face it doesn't matter that water flows directly into your house if it's so dirty that it makes you sick. So the question of how we get our drinking water is less about the physical mechanisms that make it available to us and more about how we keep our water clean and drinkable. The United States has some of the cleanest drinking water in the world, which is pretty cool. That being said, the United States has a long history of doing things really well at first and then letting all of its standards fall by the wayside. I'm not really going to get into a lot of it this video, but that track record can be seen across a number of different areas. Just to name a few and then move on. The US used to have one of the best public education systems in the world, and now we rank 125th out of 197 countries in terms of literacy. In the 1950s, the US built the world's best and largest highway system. And now 45% of all roadways in the country have been deemed by our own federal government as poor condition. So saying that we keep our water clean is nice and all, but it wasn't that long ago that the lead poisoning crisis in Flint happened, and what most people don't realize is that it's actually still happening. The water in Flint, a US city, is still not 100% safe to drink. So how did that happen? How do we keep our water lead-free, and what do you need your government to keep an eye on so that a situation like Flint doesn't happen to you? According to the CDC, there are 4 common cleaning steps that drinking water undergoes before flowing into our communities. The first of these decontamination steps is called coagulation and flocculation. This crazy little step is all about chemistry, baby. The water people add chemicals with a positive charge to the water.
Chemicals called coagulants are added to the water. These chemicals, such as aluminum sulfate or ferric chloride, work to help the particles in the water congeal together. Essentially, these chemicals have the opposite charges of suspended solids, like clays or silts.
This neutralizes the negative charge from dirt and other dissolved particles. When this happens, the particles bind with the chemicals and form larger particles called floc. And so begins step number 2, which is called sedimentation. The floc or sediment now settles at the bottom of the water container because it's heavier than the water. So basically, we've pulled gross particles from the water by separating them and making them heavier. And now for step number 3, filtering the water. Once the floc has settled, the clean water on top passes through various filters of different sizes and compositions to clean out any remaining particles that didn't turn into floc. These filters include compositions like sand or even charcoal to help catch and block any unwanted particles like parasites, viruses, bacteria, or any dangerous chemicals.
You're blocked.
And then for our 4th and final step, we have disinfection. In this phase, the filtered water is mixed with a disinfectant like chlorine or chloramine, which serves to kill any remaining viruses or bacteria that made it through the filters. And that's that. Those are the common steps that water in the United States undergoes to become potable and drinkable water. Yay! How great! But what about lead pipes? Nothing in that list about common water cleaning practices mentions lead poisoning. And that's because we gotta use pipes to get the water from the treatment plant to your house, and a lot of those are really old lead pipes. It's a relatively recent discovery that lead is poisonous for humans, and so much of our plumbing infrastructure, especially the older stuff, is made of lead. Now you might say, they should replace those with non-lead pipes. And to that I say, you're right. But we live in a country where
16 to 25%
of our tax dollars goes to the military, so that's just not gonna happen. After all, we need the military to keep us safe, right? Lead doesn't do anything but kill us, so it sounds like we really should be spending all that money on the military anyway. But well-deserved snarkiness aside, we do have all these lead pipes. So then why aren't people getting stupider or just dying from lead poisoning all the time? It's actually because we add a bunch of chemicals to the water to keep that lead at a minimum. The issue with lead pipes has to do with water being a corrosive force. A stream of water is a very corrosive force, especially when that flow of water is constant, as it is in water pipes. So to prevent this corrosion, water utilities add a form of phosphate to the water to settle along the insides of the pipe. This creates a protective film layer along the inside of the pipe to separate the lead from the water. I'm sure you've heard at this point of Flint, Michigan. Originally, Flint was getting its water from the city system of Detroit, but then they switched to the Flint River. The Flint River has about 8 times as much chlorine as the Detroit water system, and this added chlorine has a very corrosive effect on the older pipes there. The governments of Flint and just Michigan on a whole failed to ensure that there was the right balance of chemicals in the Flint River before they made this switch. They should have added orthophosphate to the water to control this corrosion, but because they failed to do so, many people died. But lead is not the only problem. The United States is a huge country with a myriad of industries and environments. For example, in farming communities, the biggest threat to water safety comes from pollution.
I'm a lead farmer, motherfucker! Yeah!
That's counterintuitive. It seems like a problem cities would have, but you're thinking of air pollution. The issue in farming communities is actually ground pollutants from the nitrate in livestock manure.
What are those?
Yes. You
In these types of areas, water treatment should involve an ion exchange process, which is something they do in Des Moines. And last but not least for this video, there is the problem of salty water. If you've ever been to the beach, then you know about the problem of beach water coming out of your tap. Tap water in coastal areas often tends to be a little salty. Salt water can come from being too close to the ocean or because cities literally take their water from the ocean, but also the saltiness in water can come from brackish water, which is an issue they have in Texas.
Brackish water or briny water is water that has more salinity than fresh water.
Salt water is not drinkable for humans, so you really gotta make sure you get that shit out of there. The way they make this water drinkable is through a process called desalinization. There are 2 main ways that utilities desalinate water. The first of these is called reverse osmosis. In this method, water is forced through a series of semi-permeable membranes, which effectively squeeze out all the salt. The other desalinization method is one you've probably heard about. It's called the thermal process. This is when the water is heated, so it evaporates, and then the vapor is collected as fresh water. Salt doesn't evaporate at the same temperature as water, so all the salt is left behind in this process.
Here's an example of a very simple, very primitive desalination facility that can be used to remove salt from like ocean water or seawater, and also to clean the dirty water.
So the next time you turn on your faucet to get a cup of water, just remember how lucky you are to have clean water flowing right into your house. And think about how much work made it clean enough for you to drink.
Are you sure this water's sanitary?
And that's the info about that.